We're moving right along. We have one more speaker, and following John's presentation, there will be just a few other comments that I hope that you will stay, because I'm going to give you several humorous events that I experienced. And if everybody walks away, I'm going to get mad at some of you. Anyhow, the last speaker, Lieutenant John Suckow, a native of Wisconsin, attended the University of Wisconsin with a degree in economics. He received his Navy wings in 1965, accumulated 198 carrier landings. He currently works in marketing sales with the Sierra Office Supply Company. He's been a docent since 2010, and he experienced something that none of the others of us up here, he actually bailed out. Lieutenant John Suckow.
Thank you, Dale. That's going to be a little bit hard to follow. Anyway, my favorite plane to fly was the F-11. And that was a plane I only flew in the training command, but it was the most smooth pilot's plane I've ever flown. You could take it into formation, park it next to another airplane, trim it up, and if your lead was smooth, it would stay there. That's probably why the Blue Angels flew it from 1957 to 1969. It was strictly a VFR airplane. I flew it out of a place called Chase Field in Texas. And at 6:30 in the morning, you didn't need a weather forecaster. If the weather was VFR, you'd hear the F-11s departing with the boom of the afterburner going off. Now, most afterburners crack when they light, but the F-11 has got a distinct boom to it. One of the things about the F-11, we have a trainer back here, or a piece of a trainer. That actually, I flew that airplane for my second to the last flight in the Navy Training Command. We now affectionately call it Fifi. If you want, you can sit in there, and it's a great place to experience it. From there, I went to NAS Lemoore. At Lemoore, I transitioned in the A4s. And we went to the Gulf of Tonkin for a little bit of fun and games with the North Vietnamese. One of the planes I flew there is the plane that's in the Naval Aviation and Space Museum in the Smithsonian. It's the A4 painted up for VA-76, and it's got the squadron livery of the squadron I flew with. It also has the name of Commander Byron Fuller on the left side of the airplane. He was shot at 7. We thought he was killed. We didn't see his parachute, but he was actually released in 1972. Now, we were very hard on skippers in that squadron. On the right-hand side of the plane is the name of Ken Cameron. He was shot down again. About a month later, he died in captivity. While we were there, we were learning to fly in an environment the Navy was unfamiliar with. We had SAMs, missiles, flak. I have one vivid memory. We were rolling in on a target to the east of Hanoi. I was riding on the Keg's wing, and as we started down to shoot, all I could hear was MiGs, MiGs, 12 o'clock high, and I looked up. There's about 8 MiGs blowing off their belly tanks. I looked off to the east. There were SAMs coming out of Hanoi, and down at the target coming up at us was the pop, pop, pop of the flak. What do? You look at your target, you sight your target, you go in and keep going. Some of us were flak magnets, others came back without a scratch. I, unfortunately, was a flak magnet. I had one specific plane where I took about 105 holes from an 88 millimeter. And that was a very interesting day. Beyond that, the most eventful days was when we went out to play a little game called Jousting with Sam and Charlie. Now, this isn't my term, this is Tom Wolf's term, but I wish I'd come up with a name. This is when we take Shrike missiles and we go off and attack the SAM sites. Initially, this was very easy. You point your airplane towards the SAM site, they'd shut down, they'd go away, end of the day, and everything was fine. Later on, it got very, very interesting and turned into a real cat and mouse game. You'd point your plane at a SAM site, they'd shut that one down, turn on one here, paint your airplane. turn that way, they turn on one from behind you. So it was a real cat and mouse game. And we didn't have an inexhaustible supply of the missiles. So what you would do is you ultimately pick one, fire at one, and the missile had a memory in it. So you'd fire it, and it would crack down even if they actually shut down. The thing was that they would play with us, and we were flying a flight called Iron Hand. They would attack us, and they would leave the main flight alone, which was part of the idea of what we were doing. Now, Dale referred to the fact that I actually ejected from an aircraft, and you don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, today I'm going to jump out of an airplane. It usually is the end of a long series of problems. And on mine, it was, you're on a maintenance test top, flying an A6, coming out of Whidbey Island. My bombardier, Tom Stewart, and I went down to Portland, Oregon. We were going to test out the computers for the bombing. We were going to test out the airplane. Everything worked fine. We came back, flying straight and level, and we started to have hydraulic failures. In the A6, that's no problem. You just pull an isolation switch, and now everything's going to be fine. Well, it was. We radioed the tower. We told them we had a problem. We told them where we were. Then we dropped down to 5,000 feet, slowed down, and we started going through the emergency procedures. Well, the emergency procedures are, there's an electric motor for your flaps and slats. So we passed 200 knots, dropped the flaps and slats motor. It worked about half the way out. So now we had half flaps, half slats. Not a good position, but still no problem. Next thing you do is you pull the air bottles to blow down the gear. Well, there was a small problem here because it blew the doors open, bottle one. Bottle two is supposed to blow the up locks. Well, it pulled the up lock on the right main, on the nose, but not the left main. And bottle three is supposed to blow them into position. Well, it blew down the right gear, the nose gear was dangling, left gear was locked up. Now we were in what you'd call extremis. At this point, our radios quit. So this left Tom working the circuit breaker panel, trying to get the radios back. I was flying the airplane, trying to figure out how we were going to tell the tower what was wrong with the airplane when he got the radios working. So we then decided we were going to make an arrested landing on the runway. They phoned the runway for us, and while we were doing this, I made 2 touch-and-go landings on the one gear, trying to bang the other ones down and make it into somewhat of a smoothly landable airplane. Well, that didn't work. So the NATOPS manual, and Tom was reading it over the radio so the squadron could hear what we were doing in the tower, and they knew that we were following the correct procedure. So we were supposed to set up for a 6-mile final, 600 pounds of fuel, 1,200 feet, which we did. We proceeded in about a quarter of a mile, and both engines quit. So we're flying, this is on Whidbey Island. You've got Whidbey Island, you've got a Saratoga Passage running up the middle, and you've got the mainland to your right. So I told Tom to get out, which he did. I turned and I paralleled the coastline, tried to do an air start. That didn't work. We had shotgun starters. I tried those. That didn't work. So finally going through about 400 feet, I ended up pulling the ejection handle, fully inspecting. This was it. This was the end of the world. It was really neat to see the sun coming up over my boots as a parachute pulled me out of the seat. Now, as I left the airplane, we had all kinds of warning lights, sirens, alerts going off. It was really nice and quiet in the parachute. Went down, landed in Puget Sound. Fishermen pulled me out. That's when I knew I had injured my back pretty badly coming out. So what happened? Well, we don't know what caused the initial hydraulic failure. We do know that the flap slat problem was caused by defective motor windings. The landing gear problem was caused by oversized O-rings being put into the air bottles. And the flame out, well, we were truly out of fuel. The fuel gauge was off by 600 pounds. The Navy in its thoroughness went down and pulled up all the pieces of this airplane out of Puget Sound, which I had conveniently parked in 120 feet of water. They brought up the fuel gauge, and the pointer was driven through the fuel gauge at 600 pounds. Now with today's glass, what they call a glass cockpit airplane, they have never been able to prove that, but fortunately we did. So this led to Grumman actually reworking the fuel systems of all the A6s in the fleet at that point. So when I left the plane, I had 2 engine fire lights burning, every annunciator light lit except for the nose toe length. And as I say, it got very quiet in the parachute. So the good thing about all this, well, once you eject, you don't have to go through the yearly ejection seat training and the water landing training. That's a good thing. And the second thing is I instantly became a member of what's called the Caterpillar Club. Those are the guys that have walked back. And I also became a member of the Martin Baker Tie Club. So every time I go to England, they give me another tie. Keeps me in ties. And thank you all for coming out. And thank you. Dale?
Something might be of interest. Of the 6 people behind me, myself included, make 7. 4 of us actually have planes that we flew in museums throughout the country. In my case, the Panther jet is at the Kavanaugh Air Museum in Addison, Texas, down by Dallas. It was a Panther jet. A Skyhawk by Alan Cartwright is in the USS Yorktown Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. An A4 flew by the last speaker, John. He's in the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. And then our buddy from the Air Force, Don Marucci, has a Connie that he actually flew at the United States Air Force Museum, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. I just found this out this past week, that F-11 cockpit over there, we title it as Fifi, F-11, like F-I-I, F for fighter, and 1 division. John Suckow actually flew that when that was a plane in the training command. It's something very unusual. Before taking on a flight, pilots have a pre-flight briefing stating the purpose of the mission. Likewise, this museum has a mission statement from its inception, and let me read verbatim. The USS Hornet Museum connects the greatest generation of Americans with future generations, educating and inspiring them to meet their challenges. In summary, honoring the past, serving the...
The only lottery club was in 1672.